you ever been in an argument with somebody who's so stubborn that it makes you crazy? No, never. It's like a bunch of innocent faces like, Rabbi, stop talking about me. Please stop talking about me. I often think about relationships with people, and when a person is stubborn, not only does it affect the person who's stubborn, it affects the person who's in the conversation with the person who's stubborn. And so let's go to the first slide, Eddie. Our Torah portion this week talks about a very stubborn people. Us, the Jewish people. And the phrase stiff-necked comes up 4 times in this one Torah portion. 4 times are the Jewish people referred to as a stubborn people, a stiff-necked people. And so I thought we might take a few moments and really explore why the people were stubborn and the reaction of the people receiving it, mostly God. What was God's reaction to their stubbornness? So let me set the stage for you. The stage is Moses is up on Mount Sinai getting the 10 Commandments. Day 1 goes by, they're fine. Day 30 goes by, they're fine. But, by day 39, they're really upset because where's Moses? So they say, we're going to create our own God. They build a golden calf, and they said, today is a holiday. God hears them celebrating and says, Moses, what is going on with these people at the bottom of the mountain? And God is beyond God's self. In fact, one of the great studies of the Torah is to understand how God matures and changes over the Torah. It's really a fun thing to study. And God has, forgive me for saying this, these human emotions because of the relationship with the Jewish people. Like if God had hair, God would have pulled God's hair out. That's how frustrated God was. So in this first instance, God is saying to Moses, and Moses is saying to God, I don't know what to do. Now, whenever you study Torah, you're supposed to study with one commentator. His name is Rashi. He really, and it comes from the medieval times, he really understood the basic meanings of what the Torah was trying to tell us. And when the Torah is unclear, he elucidates it even more. So the Torah says, and the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, they are a stiff-necked people. And here, just God, so frustrated. So commenting on stiff-necked, what does kosher orif mean? And Rashi says, this is a description of stubbornness, meaning they turned the hardness of the backs of their neck toward those who reproved them. So the stubbornness wasn't just not listening. It was when somebody said, by the way, you're wrong. You don't have the facts right. We need to talk about it. They turned their back and they refused even to listen. They wouldn't even be involved in the conversation. Now, I know there's nobody in this congregation or listening tonight who falls into this category. I understand it. But there's 2 stubbornnesses here. The stubbornness of one's idea and the stubbornness of not being able to even listen to what the other person is saying. So that's on the Israelites, right? But you can see God, you could just feel it already. God just getting like, I don't know why I created these people. Why did I get involved in this relationship? Why did I choose them to receive my Torah? Let's go to the next slide. The next chapter over. God says, I will not go up in your midst, since you are a stiff-necked people, lest I destroy you on the way. So now God is saying, listen, I'm so frustrated with you. I'm not going to be my best self if I'm involved in relationship with you. How does Rashi understand it? Rashi says, and when my Shekhinah, my divine presence, that is God's best self, is in your midst, and you still rebel against me, I will increase my fury against you. I don't know what that sound was, but apparently God was listening. You can see, you can just feel. I mean, I'm reflecting on conversations I've had over many years. I know how God feels. I know how God feels. Now, let's go back to the Israelites for a second. Is there anybody here who can make the argument of why it was understandable, at the very least, why they created the golden calf? Can anybody want to make an argument? I know there are a couple lawyers in here if you can make an argument, or anybody else? Fear of what, Roger? Fear of abandonment. I think that's a legit reason that they had in their mind, that they had faith, but the faith wasn't coming through and they freaked out. So, okay, that you can be forgiving of that. Anybody else? Yeah, Eileen.
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown, right? What is this Torah that's coming back to us going to say? What is this Moses going to say to us? Very very real. So let's create it ourselves, because we know what we see, and what we see is what we made. Absolutely. Anybody else? Yes. It kept them busy. Idle time is the worst when you're freaking out, right? I mean, it really is. Yes.
Maybe a sense of betrayal.
A sense of betrayal. That apparently God, back to Roger's original point, God's abandoned us, Moses abandoned us. We were already enslaved for 400 years. What's going to be? Yes, sir. Bad timing too, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes?
In a sense, it created a sense of community because everyone helped participate in building that castle.
Beautiful. Better to be part of a bad community than alone being good. Right? There's really true. Peer pressure is a real thing in life, for good and for bad. Ellen?
I think it was comfort, what they were used to.
Comfort. It was their binky. Even though we tried to wean them from their binky, they still had their binky. All legit. The last one, Diane?
Grasping at something to believe in.
Grasping at something to believe in. Very good. Absolutely. I think these are all legitimate reasons that a person could understand why they would do it. But then when somebody comes and says, appreciate that you've been in a tough spot, but it's actually not the right way to go. And they say, no, it is the right way to go. I'm not even going to listen to you anymore. They're righteously indignant when they don't really have a leg to stand on, right? And so even when God's best self comes, they're so stiff-necked that God is like losing it. Just losing it. He cannot turn them around. Let's go to the next slide, Ed. A couple of verses later, and the Lord said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. If I go up in your midst for one moment, I will destroy you. But now leave off your finery, and I will know what to do to you. In other words, now God is kind of trying to self-regulate. If I'm even in your presence, I am going to lose it. So get away from me so that we are not in relationship. Take a time out. And Rashi says, if I go up into your midst and you rebel against me with stubbornness again, I will be furious with you for one moment, which is the measure of my wrath. As it is said, hide but for a moment until the wrath passes, and I will destroy you. Therefore, it is better for you that I send an angel in my place. What this means is, if you're not getting through, stop banging your head against the brick wall. Because we cannot change any other person. We can only change ourselves. And if in that conversation we are not going to be our best selves, better for us to exit for at least a little while. Timeouts really do work. When you're in an argument and you're getting nowhere, taking a timeout really can help. Because you won't be your best self in that moment, even though they're indignant or stubborn or whatever it might be. If God had to take a time out, we certainly are entitled to take a time out when we're coming up against stubbornness that will not move or will not change. Everybody with me so far? All right, last one. The Torah says, and Moses hastened, bowed, this is a couple chapters later, bowed his head to the ground and prostrated himself and said, if I have now found favor in your eyes, O Lord, let the Lord go now in our midst, even if they are a stiff-necked people, and you shall forgive our iniquity and our sin, and thus secure us as your possession. So check this out. Moses, and this is why Moses is the greatest prophet of all time, he changed God's mind. He said, listen, I know there are bad people. I know they were stubborn, and they continue to be stubborn. Listen, I'm their leader, and they're stubborn with me, but let's give them another chance. Let's really think this through. And you see God in chapter 33 and 34 take a step back and say, okay, boy, all those excuses that are kind of legitimate reasons why they could have created this golden calf, even though I don't approve of it, I kind of understand it, and I guess I can give them a second chance, and I will forgive them. And that's exactly what God does, because he sends Moses back up the mountain again to create the second set of tablets. And Rashi says, as you promised us, since you forgive iniquity, which means, and if they are a stiff-necked people and they rebelled against you, and you have said concerning this, lest I destroy you on the way, you will still forgive our iniquity. There are other instances where this Hebrew word is used. That's not important right now. The point is that even in the end of being stubborn, the person who was being stubborn against has to find a way to be forgiving and find a different pathway to get to these people. And, it's not so easy. It's not so easy, whether it's a personality type, whether it's politics, whether it is a long-standing dispute between people where there's no movement. You're the one who has to move. Don't expect the stubborn person to move. And you may move away and choose not to be in a relationship with that person. That's an option too, and many people do that. But that's a shame sometimes too, because we want people to be connected even when there are disagreements or different points of view or different narratives. I talked about Israel. To me, for a very long time, I've heard the narrative that's absolutely true about Israelis' plight and the Jewish people's plight, and I don't have to prove to you my Zionist pedigree. I think it's pretty solid. On this particular trip, I also happened to hear some narratives that I don't usually hear. I went to Ramallah, the capital of the Palestinian Authority, and heard from a Palestinian reporter for the New York Times, which is a narrative I have never heard before in that kind of depth. And so and talk about a long-standing conflict and stubbornness, that's very real. And so I'm not suggesting anyone is stiff-necked. I think everybody's stiff-necked in that region, and we need to find ways to move and to share. But more personally, for each of us as individuals, to find a way to relate to human beings, even when they're being stubborn, is a spiritual challenge to be sure. But I believe we are all up to the challenge. Amen.
Amen.